My full name is Samuel Adams Frederick. Those are from my mother's family. Those names go back a way. I'm known as Sam. And my class year at Penn Law School is 1974.
And first question for you today is, how did you become a student at Penn Law?
There's a very specific answer to that. I was fortunate to be able to wangle a job in the U.S. Attorney's Office in Washington after I got out of the service and before law school. And so I was daily interacting with many assistant U.S. attorneys, many defense attorneys, and others associated with the superior court system there. And I made a particular point every day of being friendly and introducing myself to practicing lawyers, many prosecutors, many defenders mostly, and asking them some things. One of them I always asked was, where did you go to law school and how did you like it? At the time I had applications pending, or soon did, to Harvard and Columbia. I'm from New York and I had ancient family at Harvard and I liked the idea of going to one of those two schools. But then I met a graduate of Penn Law School named Peter Weiss, who was a defense attorney. And I was able in my position, since I ran the manual records division, to get acquainted with many of the attorneys, prosecutors and defenders mostly, and to make a judgment of their character, feckless youth as I was. But Peter was a very honorable defense attorney. He was very bright. He was friendly. He seemed to have an instinct to mentor. And I asked him where he went to law school. And he said the University of Pennsylvania Law School. And I said, why did you choose that? And he told me. He said it had these were his exact words, a great young faculty, smaller classes, nice city, a great place to learn to become a lawyer. So I actually withdrew my Harvard and Columbia applications and put this one in and never changed that, and that's how I got here.
Let's talk a little bit about your time here at Penn Law. Do you remember your first day of school?
That's a great question to ask because the first day was extremely memorable and not in an entirely comfortable way. I remember it was a beautiful, hot August day. The courtyard was here then, and we were handed a little stack of paper after we'd completed the registration. And the most important thing to do, I remember being told that day, was to take the fat piece of paper in the pile, which was an opinion of, I think, Justice Mosmano of the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, read it and understand it. This threw just about all of us, apparently, into a degree of panic because the case had procedurally been very complicated. And in the very first page of the case I can remember on this beautiful day were something like 20 or 25 terms I had never seen before. Sent me running to my Black's Law Dictionary, as it did all of us, and I thought, wow, had that momentary feeling, can I do this? Is it all going to be like this? Am I going to encounter foreign terms, unknown terms, every day? The answer turned out to be no, but it tremendously concentrated our powers, all of us, on, we chose to be here, someone's paying money for this, we're going to do this, and we did.
Do you remember any of your professors from your time here at the law school?
Oh, very memorable. Yes, thank you. I had Clarence Morris on torts on Friday at 11 a.m., and it was something we came to look forward to because the man, he was quite elderly then. He was easily 80. Sometimes his wife showed up and he introduced her. And he had an enormous amount of wisdom of the Oliver Wendell Holmes Jr. kind, when Holmes said, the life of the law is not logic, but experience. And Clarence had the experience of practicing law, writing law books, teaching law for decades, and yet he taught in a very simple, straightforward, transparent way. And while his mannerisms were those of an old man, we came to love the guy and respect him a great deal. And that was a very, very memorable class. And then at noon, when the class was out, we would go to La Terrasse, the restaurant that preceded Bernie's, have a few drinks, and occasionally get thrown out. It was a nice relief. There were other professors who were also memorable. A. Leo Levin, who I see has a statue, I believe, here, our evidence professor, was brilliant at the lectern. His class was so lively. He questioned us a lot. He was very interactive. He was compassionate. He helped us discover things. He's one of those professors that helps you find things yourself, not just tell you things, tell you how to think, what to think. And that was just marvelous. But the professor I remember that I was uncomfortable with distinctly in law school, I wound up concluding was the best of them all. And that was Stephen R. Goldstein, who is no longer alive. He taught civil procedure, not the most exciting subject, especially for a young person to learn, but he was tremendously frustrating to most of us in teaching. I was included in that. until years later, maybe just a few years, I realized that Steve didn't believe that at the bottom of everything was an answer. He believed that at the bottom of everything was a question. And that has influenced me the entire rest of my life, in my legal career and in everything else, because I always remember, wait a minute, maybe there's not an answer here or not one discovered yet. There may be a question, but a very refined question that is the one to focus on. That was the greatest educational experience of this law school for me. It was Steve Goldstein's civil procedure class in first year.
Interesting. He's not a name that I've heard before.
He was a brilliant, he had a typical Ivy League law professor career. He was a brilliant student. He was a brilliant law student, brilliant undergraduate to start, and he clerked in a succession of positions ultimately on the Supreme Court, as I recall. But he was extremely intellectual in the best way that someone can be. And the wonderful part, and kind of spiritual almost, is discovering all of it after the fact, not at the time. Think of it this way in visual terms. Imagine a string of binary numbers, ones and zeros. They're 1, 1, 0, 0, 1. They alternate. They seem to have no pattern when you first look at them. We're humans. We like to find things and eat things and touch things. So I think our natural tendency, this occurred to me too as I realized what he had done for us, is to look for the ones. They have a substance. The zero has no substance. But in fact, the zero is just an important binary number, as the one is. And Steve was always looking to find the zero where there was a question that wouldn't completely solve the problem, but an answer that wouldn't completely solve the problem, but there might be a question that would lead you to the problem. I'm very enthusiastic about this.
Do you remember many of your classmates from your time here?
Oh, yes, and Peter Weiss's prediction, the practicing lawyer who urged me to go to Penn Law School, was fulfilled because there were small classes. And so we all got acquainted with each other, we got rather comfortable with each other, and I think we were more inclined than students at bigger law schools to go down to the front after the class and bug the professor and ask questions and learn more. But we had some memorable students, one who continually questioned. Some part of his psychology had not made it out of age 2. And he kept drilling down with questions, and he was a very smart guy. It's a guy. We often got impatient with him, but he was relentless, and he drilled down with everything that he couldn't genuinely understand. He had the confidence to do that, and we learned a lot because of him. There were students who later became famous for a number of reasons. One later became famous after practicing law in New York City as a Saturday Night Live writer, and he was pretty much fun to be in class with. And we had students who talked too much, students who didn't talk at all. But eventually discovered the wisdom of everyone. It was really the atmosphere that Peter said I would find here, and this young faculty, and they're quite approachable. It was a very special place and a great experience.
So I take it you've had a chance to walk around the campus today.
Yes.
How much has it changed for you?
It seems to have changed a lot, changed most of it. Everything looks spiffier and more elegant. The grass courtyard is still there. I'm glad of that. But it also looks more like a city of the intellect, a city where people study and debate. It's less of a casual atmosphere, and I kind of like that. It seems like a place where you could strike up a discussion with someone. And some of the spaces are wonderful. I actually went, in fact, before I met you, to look at the cupola of the old Biddle Law Library building because I wanted to see one of the sayings that was up there, and I found it. Lord Cook's. It's one of the two sayings of his that are up there. The one that I ever will remember and that I looked for was, "The law is unknown to him that knoweth not the reason thereof," and that has been a light always of my life. I'm not looking for a form. I'm not looking for a rule. I'm looking for an understanding, and the law should embody an understanding. And part of my duty that I just took up and practiced to my clients is, and I would sometimes tell them this, my first job is to understand what the law offers here, not just risks, but opportunities. I was a transactional lawyer. And then to help you understand these, understand the risks, the requirements, the opportunities. And when I help you understand them and the alternatives, my work is done, and now you are empowered to make that decision. I once tried that quote on a Pennsylvania State Police officer on Route 202 when he stopped me for speeding. It didn't go down too well with him.
What about the dean from your time? Did you have any interaction with the dean?
I did. I had some very good interactions, in fact. When I came here, Jefferson Fordham was still the dean, and because my name perhaps began with F, as his did, on the faculty level, I was also assigned to him as a student advisee. And a delightful man. I could see he was celebrated by others, sometimes faculty, as someone who held the law school together as a collegial institution. I'm trying to remember how it was exactly said. It might not have been that. But he had that. He was a very kind man. He was a very decent man. He was a very ethical man. And it was nice to come into a world for the first time where almost all the talk and the concepts seemed technical, and meet someone who had a real ethical sense. He was devoted to world peace. He talked to us about international relations and how they could be better, and certainly during the Vietnam War they could be better, could have been better. And his successor was Bernie Wolfman, and I got to know Bernie. Funny, I got to know him after law school for a funny reason, because he had begun teaching at Harvard, and I had moved to Boston to practice, so we were often flying planes back and forth together, and we'd sit and talk. Bernie was very dedicated to the law school and to the law, and he was very transparent. You could talk to Bernie about anything, and he would respond as a teacher. He'd respond as an advisor. He was more of a scholarly disposition or personality, maybe, than Jeff Fordham. But I found him a very good dean, and I admired him a lot.
One more question about your time here. Did you take part in any student groups or any organizations while you were at Penn Law?
I did. These are both, I think, in third year. I guess it was maybe in second year, but in first year, one of my classmates, Joe Rhoda, who's now a very prominent plaintiff's lawyer in the center of the state. His father was a lawyer too, and was an inspiration to him. He loved his father very much. Father died young. Joe came to me and asked if I would like to enter the Keedy Cup competition with him. And I liked Joe. I knew him a little bit. I knew he'd thrown the football for Harvard, so I thought, here's a guy with some energy and spirit. So I said, sure. So we became moot court partners and carried that all the way through. And it was a great experience. We developed little hand signs to signal confidence and things like that. He's still a very good friend, and we exchange secret words when we call up on the phone to recall that experience. The one he loved to remember was, he said, the final was coming, and we had a habit which turned out to be very valuable. We both think we'd assign ourselves half of the test. The cases in Keedy Cup moot court usually have a forest of issues, so you have to divide them up to be able to address them. As a practical matter, we divided them, researched them, argued our sets of issues to each other, and then we switched and did it again. So we both got very familiar with the subject matter. I remember I was standing up in the library, which was in Biddle then, with Joe, and we were just about to finalize our final brief. And I said, Joe, I got good news and bad news. He said, what's that, Sam? I said, this is the last time I'm going to do this. What's the bad news? I cannot handle this paragraph. We have to rewrite this. He got so angry, he flung out his hand and hit someone in the face passing by in the library. It was obviously a wonderful and inspiring experience. We even decided to go on to the national moot competition, and we got thrown out in the Washington, D.C. round after something like an hour private discussion by the judges. It was very close, the judges said. We enjoyed doing that. And our brief won, but the other team won the overall in that Washington, D.C. round, and they went on to win the nationals. So we felt like we made a good try. And that was one thing. The other thing was that I can't remember if I don't think I even volunteered for this, but someone nominated me to be chairman of the Committee on Academic Responsibility, dealing with such things as cheating. Do you still have something like that here?
I think that might fall under Council of Student Representatives, maybe.
Okay, so it's a different structure now. This turned out to be an intense experience because we had a fairly serious accusation of a kind of cheating when I had that role as a third year. Someone discovered an assigned law book in some large class that had pages razored out of it, and the library people were confident that had not been so before the book was assigned. So we had a giant meeting of the whole school in the biggest lecture room, and some people attacked the role of the Committee on Academic Responsibility as being presumptuous, and one of the attacking speakers called it a kangaroo court. And I'm the chair and presiding over this whole thing, and I'm thinking it for a few seconds. What is the right way to respond from this? And then one of my fellow students, Bob Katzenstein, who was 2 years below me, I just befriended him slightly. He stood up in front of 300 plus people and he said, he was a quiet guy, and he said, "I don't think it's a kangaroo court at all." And he basically argued that we had acquired this responsibility and we should discharge it to determine whether there had been cheating and what to do. He showed enormous courage, and I've never forgotten him for that. In fact, I made sure he stayed my friend for many years afterward, before I moved away.
And it seems like a good time now to talk a little bit about your career. You know, what you did after you left Penn Law. You know, you said you moved up to Boston.
No, first thing was New York. I was born in Manhattan, grew up in the New York area, and I didn't really think much about it. I decided I would go back there. I wanted to be in a big law firm. I wanted to do big, challenging, transactional work. And that's what I did. I really didn't use very much imagination. I did use it in one way. I had an offer to go to a very large firm, to go back after a summer associateship, and against some qualms, I turned it down and decided to go with a small firm that was a spin-off of a large and very high-quality firm. I just had a sense that I'd learn things more intimately and faster in a way by being a relatively more important part of the puzzle. And I was gratified by that. It was a wonderful experience. It was a Cravath, Swaine, and Moore spin-off, and with very high-quality people. I worked closely with clients early. But then the firm became uneconomic, and I was fortunate that a young partner whom I liked, he liked me, told me the firm might fail. So I jumped over to another big firm. Fortunately, they were looking for someone with my experience from the small firm. And that was the big firm experience. And I had a lot of fun. It was not, as I understand, as demanding an experience as it is now. But I was assigned by a very busy partner to lead a workout, a so-called financial workout of a company that was going to go bankrupt and have to be dissolved if we didn't get the lenders, institutional lenders, which means insurance companies, banks, principally. And there were two sets of lenders and something like 70 of them. And then this partner gave me no supervision whatever. Hardly any, like maybe talking to him 10 minutes twice. I worked for 63 straight days, 16-hour days, to get this done because we had a deadline. At the time of the deadline, one of the National Accounting Standards Board changes, which had been predicted, was going to take effect. And if that took effect, we wouldn't be able to close the deal and have financials that were solvent enough for the lenders. And it was a very powerful experience, negotiating with all sorts of different groups, the company itself, two sets of lenders. I made a wonderful lifelong friend of one of the other lawyers who represented the lenders, and finally it got done. And toward the end of it, it had become so demanding psychologically, though I found it exhilarating because I was very creative. We had to create ways to honor the lenders and keep the company afloat and give them room in which to survive. I told my wife that one night I had a dream in which I was trapped in the rolls of an enormous piece of paper that must have been a quarter-mile long and 8 feet wide. It was covered with words, and I was desperately trying to crawl out of it, and I did not succeed. So that was a crucible experience. It was a wonderful experience. I had some other deal experiences like that, and got very close to some clients, overseas clients, so I opened up to an international perspective as a result of that. Then I went to another big firm where I had a lot of fun. The firm was doing certain kind of industrial development bond transaction in very large volume in the state of North Carolina because the firm, among other things, was one of two bond counsel law firms of the state of North Carolina. And as is the case in many law firms, I discovered there was no organization to this project. That is, someone was assigned to do one of these financings and would grab the latest set of documents from Jane and then mark them up and produce a set in this financing. But I decided to systematize the process. So I created model documents, borrowing from others and doing my own invention for these financings, and suddenly the deals began accelerating in speed. And one day I got a call. My secretary said that the state treasurer of North Carolina was on the phone. He called to thank me for making these deals happen faster. To go to a general point as an aside for a moment, one feature of my personality is when I find messes, I like to clean them up so they don't occur again. and I've known a number of other lawyers who do this. It's fun for me. The first one was actually here at Penn Law School. I was elected chair of the moot court board, and someone said, "Oh, there's a moot court room in the basement of the law school. Why don't you go in there? There might be some things in there that would be helpful you want to look at." I went into this room, and it was a small room with a table and a few chairs, and there are like 4 file cabinets, and there are piles of paper all over the place. I took an entire weekend, and I looked at every piece of paper, organized everything by categories, and at the time, maybe I was in Kitty Cup competition at that time, maybe not, but I wound up obtaining a huge amount of valuable information. I found all the papers on litigation that one-time Professor Tony Amsterdam had written, and they were brilliant. He was considered a brilliant professor here before my time. So that's an example, and also an example of the benefit of cleaning up messes and making them so they don't recur. That's something I've done from time to time throughout my career.
So if you had to choose, which experience do you think you found the most rewarding? Being with a small firm or being with a large law firm?
That's a very good question. I'd have to say it was being with a small firm, and it was the one that I founded in Pennsylvania. It had a twisted history. I shouldn't say twisted, it gives the wrong impression. It had a challenged history. I quit an in-house job, legal job at a Fortune 500 company because I didn't like some things that were going on. This was in 1987, and I thought I had come to understand, having worked in that company for a few years, why effective relationships, professional relationships between lawyers and their business clients always weren't happy, and they weren't successful, and they weren't effective. The two groups often didn't like each other. I'd seen that before. I'd seen it in private practice. I had an intuition that I knew the practices that could make that relationship more effective and better. And so I took 3 legal pads up to Maine, where we were on vacation, my wife and I and my kids, sat in front of the ocean on a table and tried to write this article, which I'd persuaded Harvard Business Review to submit to them because they were very intrigued by this subject. I sat in front of empty pads for maybe 3 days, and I thought, I have a feeling that I know what to do, but I don't know what it is. And I decided then, and that's where this phrase entered my life, I'm going to have to live this out. And that's what I did. I went back in-house, 2 more Fortune 500 companies, and then I had an opportunity to go out on my own here in Pennsylvania. And I did that, and I founded a small law firm called General Counsel Group PC. Transparent name. We serve as general counsel, focusing in our case on emerging private companies in technology business, because I'd had a lot of experience and some study in information technology. It was a runaway hit. Certain practices that I had a hunch would work, they were very successful, happy clients, got written up in Corporate Legal Times, American, a whole bunch of places. And we never had to develop business after the first couple of years. People referred it to us constantly, particularly our clients. So that was tremendously rewarding, because I got to conceive and create a way of practicing law. Not that it was so radical, but some items were not done by others, and it was enormously successful. We were all happy as lawyers. We had a great practice, and our clients were happy, and they said so repeatedly. That was wonderful.
Are there any other memorable moments from your career that you'd like to talk about?
There are a lot I could talk about. One that, believe it or not, I've actually said this to a number of people, including many lawyers. The most profound question that I ever was asked in a legal setting in my life was a question asked by Richard Brock. He was a fellow associate at Milbank, Tweed, Hadley, and McCloy in those days, and he later became a partner and ran the environmental facility financing practice. He's a very, very bright lawyer and someone who understands the real world very well. We were having some debate about some literal legal issue, and he said, "Sam, there's a man in a white suit. Now he goes and stands under a blue light. What color is his suit?" This was not original with Richard, but it got to the fundamental question of answering a question, the principle that answering a question will be influenced by your perspective and by the tools you have to observe the subject of the question with. And I've never forgotten that. I've backed up in cases having to do very difficult legal research or give difficult advice. Okay, what is my perspective? Is it limited? Is this a framing problem? And same for my clients, and it's been tremendously helpful.
And so, what are you doing nowadays? Are you still practicing law? Have you dialed it back a bit? You know, what are you doing currently?
I tell friends when they ask that I am theoretically retired, and I've been told by a few people in the course of my life that I'm the most curious person they've ever met, and that curiosity is something that's driven my legal career first in one direction and then another. I become curious about something and I want to understand it. I want to understand how it works, and then I want to create a perspective, a paradigm, a protocol to make it work better and use that. So I am practicing law, and I've continued to do it. I still have a client in Pennsylvania, a very successful software company that likes my work, and I'm admitted here, so I do work for them, and that's really fun. They're at the cutting edge of software to even to embed, but to help operate complex medical devices. That's really, really fun. So I stick with them. And near Ithaca, New York, where I live now, of course, we have a great university. We have Cornell Law School, and there's not a big business culture there for business law, though of course there's a fine law school. But there are a few clients. The university spins off some very bright people, like any great university, and some of them don't go far. They stay there, where they enjoy the local culture, and I pick up clients from that. For a while, I taught it was a business education program. It was the principal one in this small city for postgraduate business education that was informed by my legal experience. And I've done legal work for a variety of small clients whom I like and respect and whose businesses intrigue me. Now at this stage in my career, I can do that. And that's very delightful. And then by doing this, sticking with a brilliant young guy with an applied economics degree whose focus has been community development as a social entrepreneur, and he decided to invest himself in blockchain technology, cryptocurrency technology, and now he's rising and getting a worldwide reputation for designing blockchain-based cryptocurrency systems, and I'm his lawyer. So this is a way in which I got into yet another subject that's obviously becoming very large now, with a forest of risks and a forest of opportunities. And it's just really fun. And I'm starting to write fundamental agreements in this space, and other people are copying them. That's the way such things are. So yes, I still do practice law, and I am writing 5 books at once. I find them very synergistic and for purposes of quality, and I can take my time because I have publishers who are patient. So that's another major activity, and those two are informed by my legal experience.
And a good question to wrap things up with. Just kind of looking back on your Penn Law education and your career, do you have any advice for new lawyers who are just starting out, or maybe new students here at Penn Law?
My first piece of advice is, you're here at this wonderful place with this wonderful opportunity to learn. Embrace it completely. It's going to be hard to do that. Embrace it completely and learn all you can. And it can be a life-changing experience, as it was certainly for me in career, but also because of some of the principles I've mentioned in my personal life. The experience you want to have is that wonderful quatrain from Omar Khayyam, translated by Edward Fitzgerald. And those two, I like literature, and I call them two men separated by 700 years and 2 oceans who had the same heart. Myself when young did eagerly frequent both scholar and saint, and heard great argument, but evermore went out by the same door wherein I went. What you hope to have in your life is to go into a door to a wonderful place and come out not the same door you entered, but a different door. And I've done that more than once, and it's been absolutely wonderful. And the first one, undergraduate college is one thing, but you're just expanding kinds of learning that you have. This was different. This is the first such place I went into, and I came out by many different doors.
It's fantastic.
Oh, you liked it?
I think
He looks jaded, but that's his job.
Yeah. I mean, that was 30 minutes. I mean, you're good.
Really?
Yeah.
You're okay with it?
Yeah.
If you want to hit I'll tell you the grizzly bear personally if you want.
Yeah, let's do it.
Go right
I'm
ahead.
going to keep the camera running if you don't mind.
Yeah, go ahead.
All right. And you can use any expletives you want.
Oh, thank you. I'll just use one because it's part of the story.
Right, there you go.
Something I wound up calculating, I guess I just realized that at some point in my life, this goes back 10, 15, 20 years, that I've nearly been killed what seemed to me like a lot of times. And so I thought, let's make as much meaning of this as we can. Let's reflect on this and examine it, and even make a record of it. And I did. I wound up writing a non-theistic prayer based on this. And I could talk about several of them. I'll talk about a few of them because these were wonderful things in my life. I did survive. And I've told friends in the last few years that if Lou Gehrig stood up in Yankee Stadium, filled the seats with 70,000 people, of course it's more now, and said, "I am the luckiest man on the face of the earth," I would stand up in the mid-price seats and say, "Lou, we love you, but you're wrong. You're not. I am the luckiest man on the face of the earth." In Vietnam once, and this came back to me strongly in my later life. In fact, I've decided that I've traveled outside the country a number of times, a number of places. But if I go out again, I think the place I really would like to go is the city of Vinh in North Vietnam, where those 38 men came from, or somewhere close. My ship was in the Gulf of Tonkin in the middle of the night. It was hot weather. The fog was so dense, and this happened there during the Vietnam War, that you really couldn't see more than 100 or 150 feet. We got intelligence from the 7th Fleet Commander. There was a set of small boats headed toward us from in the northern Gulf. By the way, service in Vietnam, as I said, we're all young and crazy once, and that was my crazy idea. But anyway, I was conning the ship. So we turned on the surface search radar to see these boats coming. At first we didn't see anything. And then they showed up on the radar, and they kept coming toward us, and we were advancing slowly toward them. And then they disappeared from the surface search radar, which meant they were so close the radar could not pick them up. So they were within like 1,000 feet. So I ordered the 50 caliber machine guns mounted on the deck. And the kids down there are the machine guns. And I ordered the ship stop, and the captain was out there with me. Dawn was about to come, so we just waited. And with the dawn, the fog slowly rose, revealing, I counted them, 38 men in black pajamas. Fishermen do not wear black pajamas in Vietnam. We conclude, I think with confidence correctly, they'd come to blow up our ship. And they'd done that before. It was a very clever technique. Come up in the dark in the fog, plant a mine by a magnet against the side of the ship, get away, and it would blow up. They'd done this before. But we'd surprised them. And when the dawn rose, we saw them, but they saw us with the machine guns mounted. And I was out there on the bridge wing, and these 38 men were standing up in their boats with their hands at their sides, looking. They were looking at me. They were looking at the other few of us who were there. And what their look said was, "Go ahead. Kill us." And this staring match took place. Felt like an hour. It's probably a minute. And my second-class gunner's mate, he was a kid. He was terrified. "Mr. Frederick," he screamed into the sound-powered phone, "Mr. Frederick should open fire." And I didn't think. There was no thinking. I just said no. Because we had won this confrontation, we're also outside the 12-mile limit. So from the American point of view, this would be an international incident. I didn't think. I just said no because we didn't need to kill them. And we stared at each other for another few seconds, and on some signal I never saw, they bent down, they picked up their masts and their sails, and they put them up, and they sailed away. And I have never seen in my life with my own eyes a greater example of dedication and physical courage, forget the politics, that I saw in those men that morning, and I will never, ever forget it. I would love to be able to go to that city and ask people, "Do you know there were some men who did this and that, and I was there," and perhaps maybe somehow meet them, or their children, or their grandchildren, or their great-grandchildren, and tell them what extraordinary courage their ancestors had. That's what I would like to do. And maybe I will. I got a friend who's encouraging me. So that was one. I mean, nobody was pointing a gun at us. I nearly got shot a couple of other times in Vietnam, but that was through my own stupidity. But then there was the grizzly bear incident. This shows you how the benign can change the malign in a matter of a second. From a human point of view, malign. I was with my family. Kids were small. My oldest was 16. We're walking on the trail on a gorgeous day down from Red Rock Falls on the east side of Glacier Park in Montana. We're heading back to the lodge in the parking lot where our cars were only a short distance away, like less than a mile. And my daughter, 16, and I are first, and we're coming along a curved trail into a little grove of aspens, and the leaves are chittering, chit, 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 in the little breeze. The sky is blue. The clouds are fluffy white Winslow Homer clouds. And we come around this rather tight curve, and here is a 500-pound grizzly bear, 35 feet in front of us, best guess, digging in a hole by the side of the trail, probably for a marmot, one of its prey. And I stop, my daughter stops, she's right next to me, and the bear smells us or hears us, and it looks up, and its tongue lolls out of its mouth and goes down to the ground, and it's looking at us. Fortunately, I read the What to Do book in one of the hotel bookstores for encountering a bear, and I looked away, grabbed my daughter's wrist, and I grabbed her wrist. I saw her face, and she was staring at the bear, entranced. The bear was absolutely beautiful. Its fur was reddish. It was a young, healthy bear, and she was just smiling at the bear. I said, Alyssa, back up. She didn't back up. Talk to me softly. She didn't say anything. She kept staring, smiling at the bear. So I had to drag her back down the trail by the arm. I said, don't look at the bear. Look at me. Softly. We got out of sight eventually back around that curve. But before I did, I need to say what involves the obscenity. Because when we came around this curve, and there's the sight of the bear turning its head, looking at us, and dropping its tongue on the ground, this is kind of funny in a way. Like a movie screen formed right in front of my face, and it had a few words on it. This is how I experienced this. It actually is. And it said, shit, exclamation mark. One of us is going to die, and I'm going to make sure it's me. Because I really thought that. I thought, this is it. Of course, it wasn't it. The bear let us get away. The last one I might talk about, because I think you'll enjoy it, is when in my girlfriend's driveway in Flowertown, outside town, on the night of July 4th, 2010, we were dropped off from a session at a swim club by some friends of hers to change and go to a 4th of July party with some other friends. I had parked my car in her driveway. The friends had given us the ride to the swim club and back. I saw that my car had a flat tire. So I said, you go up and change, and I'll change the tire. So I set about changing the tire. The driveway was kind of flat. And beautiful night, air was still. No clouds, no wind. And I just about finished changing the tire. I was down on this knee, having lowered the car to the ground off the jack and tightening the lugs, the last step. And that's when it happened. A 100-foot tall, approximately 100-year-old oak tree fell on me from behind with no sound of which I was conscious. I won't make this very long. The first funny part, but though not from my perspective, the main crotch of branches that were about a foot thick hit me right in the middle of my back, spun me around onto the ground. When my girlfriend saw the electric line taken down with the spark that resulted, she raced out of the house screaming, and she said, the only thing I saw were your boots sticking out from under the tree. It was the Wicked Witch of the West and Wizard of Oz all over again. I was very lucky with a succession of rescuers. It was 4th of July night, so all the fire companies were ready to go save people from fireworks fires. And I was flown to the hospital of the University of Pennsylvania very quickly. I was very lucky to make it. The doc said that if the part of the tree that hit me had been 6 inches to the left, would have been instantly killed. And there's more to that. I recovered amazingly. I love to dance, especially Cajun and Zydeco dancing. I've been to Louisiana. I have such empathy for the peoples that created this wonderful music. The French who were forcibly deported by the British from Nova Scotia, they called Acadia, Acadie, to Louisiana with next to nothing. And then the African slaves who were brought here against their will also with less than that. And the two groups who melded together in Louisiana, they made this wonderful music. So it's music of the heart for me. Anyway, and I wanted to get back to doing that. But to jump ahead before I jump back and finish, so 2 years later, I am wonderfully recovered. I just have some hardware in here, not much damage at all. And I'm going through a car wash in Conshohocken, and behind me comes out a White Marsh police vehicle. So as I always had done since the accident, I walk over to the officer and say, Officer, I wish you'd pass on my thanks to your brother, Officer Kevin Gailey, who saved my life. And he said, oh, are you the tree guy? We had a laugh. And I said, yeah, I'm the tree guy. He said, I was there too. And I said, oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't remember you were. I was a little out of it. He said, yeah, you were. And then the officer, with the baldness of police, said, all of us there thought you were going to die. That included my girlfriend. How about that? Someone tells you, who was there seeing you under a tree, says, we all thought you were going to die. But one person knew he wasn't, and that was me. I just somehow knew it, even though I was so out of it. Funny part. So now it's the next morning after the accident, and I'm slowly waking up. I have a morphine line running in here, but I don't know that yet. I'm so out of it. And I hear my girlfriend's voice, Sam, Sam. And I look slowly. Oh, and there's her pretty face. Oh, hi, Karen. But at the same time, I'm looking up at the ceiling and at the furniture. The ceiling is artificial tile with those ugly plastic strips in between them, and the furniture is all covered with formica. And I remember thinking to myself, this is a really ugly room. I don't want to be in this ugly room. But I didn't have the wherewithal actually to say it. I just thought it. And then my girlfriend's voice is saying, someone else is here to see you. And I say, oh, who's that? And then she disappears, and in place of her face comes the face of my smiling Episcopal priest, complete with collar. And I think, oh, this must be really bad. And it was really bad. But then I had a chance in 3 different hospitals over the course of a month to reflect on the whole thing, and I thought, well, let's think of it this way. You can tell I'm somewhat of an optimist. You wake up in a hospital bed on your back with your priest smiling at you. That's good. Means you're alive. You wake up on a big piece of cotton with an old kindly man in a long beard smiling at you. That's bad. Means you're dead. And that was what I took away from that I like to remember. Those are some things.